Jacob's Well, a popular swimming hole near Wimberley, will remain closed to swimmers for the foreseeable future.
One of the most popular swimming spots in Central Texas remains closed for swimming. Jacob's Well has not been open for nearly a year.
The Watershed Association in Hays County gave a tough update today, revealing Jacob's Well remains closed as the spring experiences zero flow.
A camera drifts through absolute silence, 30 feet below a Texas creek bed, into a chamber no living person was ever meant to see. What it recorded that day did not just end a 2-decade search. It left the divers who watched the footage back at the surface unable to explain what they felt while they were watching it. This is the story of Jacob's Well, and the deepest look anyone has ever taken into it. On the surface, Jacob's Well looks nothing like a place that keeps a body count. It sits just outside Wimberley, Texas, in the hill country northwest of San Antonio, a nearly perfect circular opening in a limestone creek bed, about 12 feet across. The water inside holds a constant 68 degrees year-round, fed by the Trinity Aquifer, one of the most vital freshwater systems in the American Southwest. On a summer afternoon, the place fills with families, teenagers, and tourists who line up to jump from the ledges into water so clear it barely looks real. For most of the people who visit, Jacob's Well is nothing more than a beautiful swimming hole. What almost none of them understand is that they are jumping into the mouth of a flooded cave system that has claimed at least 8 lives, and that beneath their feet, the geology of that cave has been quietly rewriting the record of how deep human curiosity is willing to go before it costs someone everything. Jacob's Well is technically classified as a karst spring, which means it is the surface opening of a vertical cave carved into limestone that was laid down across the floor of an ancient sea roughly 100 million years ago. Over time, slightly acidic groundwater dissolved that stone from the inside out, opening chambers, passages, and squeezes that no engineer designed and no one fully controls. For a recreational swimmer, the adventure ends at the floor of the first chamber, a sunlit room roughly 30 feet down. For a trained cave diver, that first chamber is only the beginning. Divers and researchers with the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association and independent cave mapping teams have, over the decades, documented more than 7,000 feet of interconnected passage beneath the surface, threading downward through at least 4 known chambers, each one narrower, darker, and more disorienting than the one above it. Cave divers who have explored the system describe a squeeze between the upper chambers so tight that a diver has to remove the air tank from their back and push it ahead of them by hand just to fit through. Deeper still are features that the diving community has given names like the coffin and the final squeeze, names that were never meant as marketing. They are literal descriptions, written by people who barely made it back out, of spaces where the rock closes in from every side at once. In diving circles, Jacob's Well has carried a grim reputation for decades. It is sometimes referred to, only half as a joke, as a diver's grave, a place that has quietly ended more lives than almost any other freshwater cave system in Texas. The single most dangerous feature of Jacob's Well has nothing to do with sharp rock or narrow passages. It is the floor. The bottom of the deeper chambers is not solid limestone. It is covered in a fine powder-like silt that has settled there for centuries, undisturbed until a diver's fin brushes against it. One careless kick is enough to turn water so clear it looks artificial into a total, blinding whiteout within seconds. In that instant, a diver loses every reference point they had. They cannot read their pressure gauge. They cannot see a dive partner who might be 3 feet away. And if they never ran a guideline back toward the entrance, which several of the divers who died there had not, they lose any reliable way of finding the surface again. What follows, according to those who study diving fatalities, is a predictable and merciless sequence. Panic drives the breathing rate up, the air supply drains far faster than anyone plans for, and the cave simply outlasts the diver's tank. Authorities have tried to stop the cycle more than once. At different points, the deeper entrance to the cave system was sealed behind a metal grate, an attempt to keep untrained divers from following in the footsteps of the ones who never came back. It rarely worked for long. Divers determined to test themselves against the well's reputation returned at night with bolt cutters and reopened it. The pull of the place, whatever it actually is, proved stronger than a locked gate. That pull is nowhere more evident than in the events of September 1979, the incident that still defines Jacob's Well's darkest chapter. Cave diving at the time operated with almost none of the safety standards that exist today. There was no certifying body with the authority to stop a confident, experienced diver from pushing deeper into a flooded passage with a single tank of air and nothing but his own skill to rely on. Among the cavers who gathered at the well that September were two young men, one in his early 20s, who had been diving since he was barely a teenager and had built a local reputation as one of the most capable divers in the group, and a younger partner who looked up to him. They had traveled with roughly 20 others and made camp at the site. Late that night, the two of them, along with a third diver, descended together through the upper chambers, working their way toward the narrow crack that opens into the rarely reached fourth chamber, a room so difficult to access that few divers had ever laid eyes on it. At the squeeze leading into that chamber, the plan changed in a way the third diver had not been told to expect. The two lead divers removed their air tanks, pushed them ahead through the gap, and disappeared into the passage without a safety line and without backup lights. The remaining diver waited, flashing his light into the opening, hoping to catch a response. He struck his knife against his own tank, sending a sharp metallic ring through the water, a universal signal used to get another diver's attention. Nothing answered. With his own air running low, he held his light on the passage for as long as he safely could, then turned back for the surface. The moment he broke into the night air above the water, the clear pool below him bloomed into a dense brown cloud. Something deep in the cave had given way. He understood immediately what it likely meant. The call for help went out that night to Don Dibble, a dive shop owner near San Marcos and a former military diver widely respected as the region's most experienced deep-water recovery specialist. Dibble had responded to emergencies at Jacob's Well before, and he understood exactly what a call like this one usually meant. He arrived quickly with a small team. By the following morning, his divers were working the mouth of the fourth chamber with garden trowels, a deliberately gentle tool chosen because the passage ahead was packed with loose gravel that behaved like sand in an hourglass. Every handful they cleared was replaced almost immediately by more sliding down from above. The passage was, in effect, in a permanent slow-motion collapse, and disturbing it only made the problem worse. Faced with that reality, Dibble made the decision that would define the rest of his career. He would not ask any diver on his team to go somewhere he was unwilling to go himself. With a game warden named Calvin Turner serving as his safety diver, Dibble ran a guideline down into the cave and pushed his head and shoulders into the unstable passage. The gravel gave way entirely. In an instant, a cascade of rock and sediment buried him up to his arms, pinning him in total darkness. He could not move enough to bang his tank for help. He could not signal Turner, who was waiting just behind him. His breathing spiked, his air supply began draining far faster than his training had accounted for, and in that moment, by his own later account, Dibble accepted that he was likely going to die in that passage, alongside the two men he had come to find. He made the calculated decision to stop fighting and conserve what little air remained, but a sudden, involuntary convulsion, the kind of survival reflex the body produces when it is starved of oxygen, shook him just enough to shift his position. Through the churned water, a light appeared. Calvin Turner had recognized what the sudden cloud of silt meant and moved without hesitation, pushing a spare regulator into the collapsed passage until Dibble's hand found it. He survived, but only barely. In the struggle, he had swallowed a significant amount of air along with water, and as he was brought to the surface, that trapped gas expanded with the drop in pressure. By the time he reached open air, his abdomen had swollen dramatically. Doctors initially treated him for decompression sickness before X-rays revealed the true injury. His stomach wall had ruptured under the pressure of the expanding gas, and the resulting infection was, at the time, frequently fatal before advances in surgical treatment made recovery possible. Dibble survived, and went on to lead cave recoveries in Texas for more than 4 decades afterward. But the two young divers he had gone down to find were still somewhere in the dark, and the cave was not finished with its silence. A commercial crew was eventually brought in with industrial suction equipment, attempting to clear the collapsed gravel from the top down, but for every foot of passage opened, the unstable surrounding walls fed material back in just as quickly. A second, independent team was called in to evaluate the site and reached the same conclusion the first team had. Continuing the recovery attempt posed an unacceptable risk to the living. 12 days after the two divers vanished, the official search was called off. The entrance was sealed once again, and for a long time, Most people assumed that was where the story would end. It was not. During those final days of the 1979 search, once enough gravel had been cleared, rescuers pushed a small camera mounted on a pole through the narrow opening into the space beyond. The image that came back was rough and grainy, but it was enough to make out an air tank valve and a regulator mouthpiece resting undisturbed in the chamber, the first confirmation of exactly what had happened in that room. Then, in 1981, a major flood tore through the cave system with enough force to carry one of the diver's remains out through the passages and eventually to the surface, allowing his family a measure of closure nearly 2 years after he disappeared. The other diver remained lost for more than 2 decades. It was not until October of 2000 that a specially trained recovery team, after years of preparation and repeated flooding events that everyone assumed would have scattered any remains beyond recovery, finally reached and filmed the 4th chamber directly. The team had not gone down expecting to find anything of the diver still there. What their camera recorded instead led directly to his recovery, more than 20 years after the night he vanished, finally giving his family the answer they had waited half a lifetime to receive. People who have seen that 2000 footage, divers and researchers among them, tend to describe it the same way. The camera moves in complete silence through a space that no living person was ever supposed to occupy, and watching it produces a strange, unshakable sensation of seeing the world through the eyes of someone who was left behind in the dark. It is not frightening in the way a film might manufacture fear. It is heavier than that. It is the quiet, physical weight of knowing exactly what that room cost, and exactly how long it kept its secret. Even after that recovery, the well has never fully given up its stranger reputation among the people who dive it. Experienced cave divers who have pushed into the deepest reaches of the system and made it back out often describe something beyond the ordinary danger of gravel and silt, a sensation they refer to simply as the pull. Not the physical current of moving water, but a quiet, persistent urge to go a little farther, to see around one more bend, to keep moving past the exact point every piece of training tells a diver to stop. Some attribute it to nitrogen narcosis, the well-documented effect of breathing compressed air at depth, which can distort judgment and induce a false sense of calm. Others point to rising carbon dioxide levels or the disorienting effects of low-frequency sound moving through enclosed water. Whatever the true cause, it has proven strong enough to override the instincts of even the most careful divers. There is also a longer history at Jacob's Well that predates any of its documented drownings. Long before European settlers gave the spring its biblical name, indigenous communities in the region treated freshwater springs like this one as significant, liminal places,